Hi, welcome to Anatomy on Demand, and in this section we're going to learn all about the spinal cord, which is, as you know, part of the central nervous system. We're completely done with the brain at this point, and we've also discussed the ventricular system. So the spinal cord itself extends from the medulla oblongata at the foramen magnum down the entire vertebral canal. And when you do a cross section of it, what you notice is in the deep tissue, there's a butterfly shaped area, which in the cartoon drawing has been made gray. So the spinal cord itself has that deep gray matter surrounded by white matter on the outside. Now there are structures attached to the outside of the spinal cord, these yellow structures, and I want you to realize they are not central nervous system, because central nervous system is brain and spinal cord, and these are outside the spinal cord. However, I'm leaving them on all the pictures because these structures help orient you anterior from posterior. So if you notice on both the real spinal cord at the top, on one side you have this big round structure, and on the other side you don't, okay? And if you look at the cartoon drawing, you can see that you have the round structure on one side and it doesn't exist on the other one. So whichever side you find that round structure on, that is showing you which side is posterior, because that structure is known as the dorsal root ganglion, okay? And dorsal being a synonym for posterior. So if you recall, a ganglion is where we find cell bodies outside the central nervous system. So it's like gray matter not in the brain and the spinal cord. Okay? And the reason why it's called the dorsal root ganglion is because this is where the cell bodies are, and is located on something called the dorsal root. Okay, so this is showing actual photomicrographs of looking at a vertebrae from above, where you can see the spinal cord coming out and the bright yellow dorsal root ganglion. This is leaving through the intervertebral foramina, and then out here it's going to be a spinal nerve. If instead of that kind of view, if we took off everything that was posterior, so if we took off the pedicles and the spinous processes, then you see the spinal cord laid out here. You can see the dorsal root ganglion sitting in the intervertebral foramina, and you can see all the little tiny rootlets which are attaching the between the dorsal root ganglion and the spinal cord. Okay. So if we were talking any one of these little things, we'd call a little rootlet, but together we call this the dorsal root. Okay. So this is where all the sensory information is going into the spinal cord. So if that is the dorsal root containing the dorsal root ganglion, then what do you think this structure on the other side of the spinal cord is called? There's no ganglion there. So it's just called the ventral root. Okay, so pause and check out all three of these structures on the pictures of the spinal cord over to the left side. Now, continuing laterally, okay. Here we have the dorsal root and the dorsal root ganglion, and on the other side we have the ventral root. And if we go lateral, then we have what we call the spinal nerve. And the spinal nerve is like two-way traffic. We have on the dorsal side the sensory information going into the spinal cord, and on the ventral side we have the motor information coming out of the spinal cord. So from the spinal cord itself, on one side you have a dorsal root and a dorsal root ganglion, and if you follow it becomes the spinal nerve. On the ventral side you just have the ventral root, which eventually merges with the dorsal side to become the spinal nerve. All right, so let's now look at the spinal cord itself. So that butterfly or H-shaped area in the center, that's gray matter of the spinal cord. Okay, now gray matter of the spinal cord is not going to be the answer to anything. Okay. because when we look at this, what we can see is there are kind of bulges in different areas. You can kind of see like there's a butterfly wing that goes dorsally, and there's a butterfly wing that kind of goes to where those ventral roots are attaching. And then you can see like this little bulge right in the middle between the two of those. So the wing that is going to where the dorsal root ganglion is, see the dorsal root, so this is dorsal, that part of the gray matter is called the dorsal horn. Going anteriorly, it would be the ventral horn, which would be getting messages from the ventral, which would be sending out messages to the ventral root. And between the two of them, the little bulge between the two of them, this bulge is only found in the thoracic area, and that's called the lateral horn. So that's it for the gray matter. When we look at the white matter, what you notice, there's white matter in a whole 360, and there's kind of a fissure that's dividing it in the mid-sagittal plane. We're not going to learn the names of these fissures, but if you kind of like go with this fissure, you can kind of start there and go to like the point of the lateral horn, and then you could go from there to about the mid part of the ventral horn, and then you can go from there to the mid-sagittal plane. And so you can see how we can divide the white matter in 3 separate areas. Oh, I forgot about this slide. In the center of the butterfly, there is this area where we can have neurons exchanging information between the right and left side of the brain, and this is just called the gray commissure. All right. And in the middle of the gray commissure, we have that space, that last part, the most inferior part of the ventricular system, and that is the central canal in the spinal cord. All right. Now back to the white matter. So as you can see, there's 3 general areas on each side of the spinal cord that are white matter. The posterior part is called the dorsal column. The anterior part is going to be called the ventral column. And then between the dorsal and ventral columns, you are going to have the lateral column. So hopefully those words make a lot of sense. And what's happening in these columns is we have axons going either up towards the brain or coming back down from the brain before they go back out to the body. All right, that's it for the cross section. Now we're going to look at the spinal cord as a whole. And you notice it's not all the same thickness everywhere, but that's more of a lecture topic. I want to talk about the very lowest part of the spinal cord. Notice in an adult, the spinal cord ends right around the L1, L2 area. It doesn't go all the way down into the sacrum. When you were first formed, it came all the way from the lowest part of the sacrum attached to the coccyx, but then as you grew, your spine grew more than your spinal cord did. So that's why in an adult, it ends in the upper lumbar area. And if you look at the distal end of the spinal cord, what you'll notice is it's like a cone head. It's like the point of an ice cream cone. Okay. Do you see it right there where the big black arrow is? And so this area of the spinal cord, this conical area, is known as the conus medullaris, sometimes called the medullary cone, but everybody I know calls it the conus medullaris. Okay. And from the conus medullaris, right smack, let me go back to this picture. Find the conus medullaris and look right here at the middle. Do you see this one fiber coming from the very middle of it? You can see because it has like this number on it. That one structure is known as the filum terminale. Piece of pia mater, which is on the meninges lecture, that attaches the conus medullaris all the way down to the coccyx, and it's been attached since it was formed. But what has happened is the filum terminale has gotten longer as the spine got longer. Now you also will notice that surrounding the filum terminale, there are all these other structures, and if you look at them carefully, you can see them coming down, and then you will see some of these exiting at all the intervertebral foramina. And what these are the spinal nerves exiting further down. So when they were first formed, they were just like all the spinal nerves up in the thoracic area, where you would have your dorsal root and your ventral root, and laterally you have the spinal nerve, and it just went straight out at that level. But then as the spine elongated, what happened was they couldn't come straight out. They actually went down before they went straight out. And if you take one of these in a human and you let it dry out, it looks like the very, very thick hair of a horse's tail. I don't know if you've ever seen a horse's tail, but sometimes I don't know. If you haven't seen a horse's tail, then I can't explain it to you. It's just very, very thick fibers. And so obviously for the anatomist, it looked like that to them as well. And that's exactly what they named it, the horse's tail, the cauda equina. And so the cauda equina is everything that is completely surrounding that filum terminale, which is a piece of pia mater. All the yellow area, that's all spinal nerves coming out at various levels. So this whole bracketed area. And with that, we are done with the spinal cord, and I will see you for the final lecture of this day, which is the meninges, the coverings of the brain. So thank you once again for all your work.